We have offered the offices to many people from inside Germany, Gemstone people from inside Germany, from outside Germany, to use the offices as a trading place. And I still was on the board of directors. We convinced, we made an arrangement with the customs as well as the tax offices, so easy coming and going of the Gemstone was done, and there was also provided a great help for exporting the stones. We provided then safety, we provided safe deposits, we provided security, and I will tell you something, this functions until today, 30 years later. But the open borders, the open exchange was a failure and will be anywhere a failure, because the gemstone business is a business done in confidence. I do not speak from illegal in confidence, because if you write an invoice and you show it to your fiscalization, you have made a legal business and you have to pay your taxes after that. That means there is no stone changing hands without paper, without any document. And still today we are in more modern times. Still you can offer today, for example, how we call this certificates. You can offer certificates. You can offer also like the Kimberley process, things like that, and can improve it very much. So I will tell you something. Out of my experience, a trading platform open to everybody who is a trader, who has a license, or maybe who is a mentor, like a cooperative, like Mr. Gilbertson said, that will work. But do not forget, we also allowed, we have nothing to allow, we have a free trade, we are a free country, but everybody still could do also his business in his home office, wherever he was since the last 100 years or 200 years living. But he also could move for a certain day to the boss in his office, because when many visitors came and the hotel was full, it was better to sit in the office just near them and talk with them business, or sometimes take them home to our own offices and there show them more stones. This I can tell you from my experience. Thank you.
I'll be very brief, because what Julius said, I can give you another example. It's practically the same example. When not 23 stories, but a 12 floor building called the Emerald Trade Center in Bogota. And that opened like 15, 20 years ago and was meant to be a bourse. It never worked as a bourse, as an exchange. It was transformed exactly as they did in Oberstein. Offices were bought by private companies that worked with their own customers within a secure environment. The only difference is that they don't have customs in the building, it's a few blocks away. But it procures an environment for companies to bring their customers to do whatever brokerage business or selling their own stock. And this is where the miners or other dealers go and show their merchandise to these companies that are receiving their own customers. So this is a buying platform, a trading center, really more than an exchange. So this is just a concept, but it's important to keep that in mind. I mean, exchanges, regulated exchanges, and open floor don't work in our industry, because confidence, as Julius said, is very important. You can get for one customers, one type of merchandise will be sold at a certain price. For another customer, it will have another value, because the market is different. It has to be kept this way. So I will pass the microphone to my brother here.
Thanks, John. I think the challenge we have right now in Zambia is how do we improve the industry using international best practices. And because we are young, it requires that we must first learn to walk before we run. So if we are going to create change that is transformation, the first thing we must learn, and that's why I like the debate we had in the previous session, is to understand how does this industry operate. And we look at the success stories in the world, we also look at the failures. And out of that, we become wiser. And then say, for us in Zambia, we are going to be the best by taking on what the best have done and avoiding what the failure have done. So we don't need to reinvent failure. So in view of that, we need to go back and learn, how does this industry work? Does this industry support a concept of a gemstone exchange? Yes or no? And if yes, what is it that needs to be done? If no, it's a no-go area. We don't need to waste our time. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose? What are we trying to achieve? If what we are trying to achieve is to provide a platform, a market upon which, I think the way I understand this is the street small trader, where they can have an opportunity to sell their product. What can we do as a country, given the knowledge that in our dialogue, in our idea of sharing ideas, what platform or framework could we create that will enable an average Zambian with his gemstone or her gemstone to go and sell? I think that's what I would take on this. It's an area I know zero about. So you can see, I don't know anything about this. So I'm now talking about concepts. So from a conceptual point of view, we do need to understand the industry. Now, one of the challenges we face, Gemfield, Sean made a great offer at the end of his presentation. He said he would like, through my big brother's organization, to sit down and see how they could create a cooperative or institution where people could sell, a facility. But he made one comment. He said the buyers would be followed. There was Gemfield buyer 1, buyer 2 as an example. We shall track them what they buy. But the source, he said, we will not bother as long as they bring. Now, we need to think through that. The concept is brilliant, but we need to think through that what we do does not encourage a high level of theft in the industry. Because what I see when I visit Gemstone mines, I notice that it's a super heavy security type of industry. For every little person I saw with a chisel, the hammer and the chisel, there were 10 people looking at him. So he had 20 eyes on him. So, which gave me the impression that, oh my God, this is a hell of an industry. So it means the biggest single component is going to be security. Now, if you then go and set up a unit in Kitwe, where you don't ask questions where people steal, you run the challenge and the risk of how do you control high-level theft. Because what I see, how Zambia should develop, Zambia should be accredited, if there is such a word, internationally accredited. Zambian emerald must be certified. Zambian system must take on board international best practice. My friend talks about the word harmonization of policy. There's this thing which is similar to the Kimberley process in diamonds, but there's a similar type framework for the gemstone. That is what we should spend our time and create a platform so that the words like, what do they call it, like a thief, is that the word? A thief, or somebody who has a smuggled diamond and what, begin to go down. That the emeralds become respectful because we can determine the source where it came from because it's certified. So it's a good concept, but let's put our heads together and let's listen to the experts. What are the experts saying? And that's what we follow.
Look, our discussion, of course, is open and we have so many opinions, but I also tell you something. If you give people the opportunity to take them from the street and to have a heaven where to go, where they get treated well, and the idea of certification I find very good, personally, and worldwide also, to make Zambian emeralds more and more available. And now exchange or platform, a platform I think is workable. An exchange, after my experience and international experience, will not work in a way of a real expert. Thank you. Claude, you have something to say?
No, I think this is all said. I mean, just infrastructures need to be adapted and easily usable by the industry, by the trade, and easily performed and offered by the government. So that's good thing I think will be addressed in the next topic, which is harsh regulation merely boosts illegality. So maybe we can just move forward to that.
Yes.
Any question?
So is there any question regarding the Gemstone exchange? Yes.
This is directed to Dr. Mulenga. I remember, I think, Rita, was it 7 years ago? Well, you chaired a meeting at the Panellists Hotel, and I was privileged to attend that. And it was, I think we were discussing the setting up of Gemstone Exchange. What were the conclusions at that meeting?
Thank you very much. I'm glad you have an excellent memory. I was the chairman of the Economic Diversification Task Force for the country when we were looking at ways how we could diversify the Zambian economy and move away the significant presence and influence of mining without reducing the effect of mining and the importance of mining to Zambia. So at that time, when we did spend a lot of time, we looked at gemstone industry, and we came up with what we consider very progressive ideas. And those ideas were the kind of ideas of, first, we must formalize the industry. Because as far back as that time, as you'd agree, we had already noticed that our industry is not formalized. By that was that, for lack of a better word, it was too informal. Everybody would claim to be an emerald miner, whatever, and all that, and there were no records, correct records, and so on. So we said, government needs to formalize that. I think my big man, Mr. Vitana, can help me. At that time, they had more than almost 1,000 people with permits. So we were saying, look, can you bring that number to workable quantities and all that? So the issue was formalization. And moving from formalization, we wanted to have development that would be large scale, medium scale, and small scale, so that you would cater. Most Zambians would be in small scale, maybe medium, and then international investors would be in large scale. So the kind of things, for instance, we are seeing now Grizzly doing and Gemfields doing, that's what we had hoped for. And in a way, we feel proud that has happened. Now, the vexing issue we had was, how do you get this thing localized once you have already put this infrastructure? And in our conceptual terms, we came up with the concept of a gemstone exchange. But a gemstone exchange, our concept was basically like what Sean from Gemfields shared with us. That was the sort of concept we had, that there would be this trading floor where somebody, either from our point of view, we felt that it would be better run by a private entity. Because going back from our history of having run our mines as nationalized, we didn't want to go back to kind of nationalization type of thing. So we felt even the gemstone industry, if we create a gemstone exchange as a concept, understand me, it would have to be run by a private entity or private institution, but it would be a trading floor. And that's how we promoted that. And further down to that, that's where we recommended that we would like, for instance, in Ndola or Kitwe, to have lapidaries and so on. And the product of that is the training schools that the government has now put in place. We have now a lapidary training school, and through the University of Zambia, courses have been done across the country to teach people basics of understanding gemology and so on. So it's a concept, but what I'm trying to say, the beauty, in this room, we have people who are experts on this gemstone industry, and what I'm appealing to them, share with us what works. because that's what we want to do in Zambia. We have no time. We are too poor to be slow. We need to be fast. So let's put something that would work and promote the industry. That's the reason why I was answering it in that way.
Thank you very much, my dear brother. Very good explanation, and I think you should follow this way, but the time will show. We have talked now about so many things, but the gemstone floor, a marketplace, is, after my opinion, necessary. People can come and go freely, offer their goods, but follow rules and regulations. This we made also in Germany. We made our rules and regulations after these things were running well. We had a good understanding with the fiscalization, a good understanding with the customs, and from that time on, these buildings, these offices, were working well, and we are free. We allow any nation to be a part. We have Indians, we have Japanese, we have even Chinese, and of course a lot of Germans taking part in this marketplace, but not forgetting that they can do the same thing in their own office if they want. And I give you a proposal. We have now the next topic, does harsh regulation merely boost illegality? I think we should continue with this now.
Yes, but we need to call Mr. Delitana up here and Mr. Phiri. Michael Phiri. Is he here?
Yes.
Okay. Can you come up here, please? So coming to regulations, regulations are important, but they need to be very simple. They need to make it easy for everybody to comply with. So once this is put in place, there needs to be an enforcement of regulation. Regulations that are too complicated or are too harsh have only increased illegality. And people, when it's too much tax, when it's too much burden, too much paperwork, too much steps to go to do it according to the regulation that some government may put in place, people find it just too complicated, not profitable enough for business, so they should not respect it, and the business becomes underground. And that, of course, is the basis of smuggling, of unaccounted money floating all over, capital that remains outside, and it prevents investment to come into the country because there's no fixed rules and visibility. And if it's not attractive for the small people, it will not be attractive for big people either. So that would be my introduction. Now I will call my brother here, who is working on those subjects also through the ETTI, to give his point of view.
I'm very happy that this subject was put on the discussion point. Just for my fellow Zambians, when we had the National Economic Diversification Task Force, we looked at this in great detail. And our conclusion was that from a perspective of doing business and from perspective of world best practices, and we looked at emerging economies in the world, the old economies like German, UK, the States, the emerging economies in the Far East, and so on, and the underdeveloped. It was very interesting when we did that study, that what we found is that there was a correlation between massive regulation and the level of development. And we found that most of the poor countries had the highest number of regulations. And the emerging economies had the least number of regulations. So we then set out to create situations where we reduced regulations. And one classic example and outcome of the work that we had done at that time was what you see now as ZDA. We came up with a concept of a one-stop shop. Before that, we didn't have ZDA. And we felt that one of the challenges we had in Zambia was investors, when they came, they had to move from office, this office, to that office, to that office, collecting all sorts of pieces of paper. And we felt it would be prudent and make a one-stop shop where an investor would come, and that's what we did. Now we have ZDA. So the bottom line is that a good economy runs on less regulation. There has to be an element in the society where people are encouraged to be innovative. Of course, following the law. You don't want jungle law, but you need to provide guidelines. And the reason for that is that government, by the way it is structured, with all the best intentions, it will get challenges on how to monitor and regulate the same regulations they have. So the lesser the regulations they have, the more efficient our government becomes. So I think for us in Zambia, we need to move and maintain, and we've made tremendous progress towards, and we are at a stage now, internationally, we are among the countries that are doing very well in terms of regulation. But there's always, it's work in progress. And because it's work in progress, we can move on and see where we can improve. And a good example for us, all of us who are seated in here, is to have a product of this conference to have a value to Zambia. It must produce deliverables. And one of those key deliverables would be, if we look at the regulation aspects of our sector, is it promoting growth? Is it promoting attracting investors? Is it promoting proper tax to be paid to the Zambian government? And if not, we'll make the changes, but we'll change the regulations. We'll reduce the number of regulations. I can stop there.
Thank you. Well, the next speaker on that subject would be Mr. Lita.
Thank you. Yes, indeed, a harsh regulation, if not properly calculated, could cause a lot of harm. The problem with this industry is there has been a lot of concerns for a long time, for which government and the nation as a whole has been looking for answers, and they don't seem to be getting them. When government comes up with what we feel is a harsh regulation, there is no harm in us coming out. I don't think government wants to see any of the companies that have succeeded, KTM, Grizzly, and then closed down or anything like that. No, I don't think they want to see that. So it depends on what you call a harsh regulation. What government has been looking for, what the nation has been looking for, they are not getting the answer for a long, long time. So they come up with this, but there is room for discussion. A doctor prescribing quinine injection for a kid suffering from cerebral malaria is a harsh decision, but it's the right decision. But for any other patient, that could be wrong. So all I want to say at this instance is, yes, definitely the answer is a harsh regulation would sometimes ground an industry to a halt, and that we don't want to go into. So I thank KTM that they organize this summit so that some of these things can be brought up. This is, I think, what government is looking for. When some of these regulations can be changed, we just had that thing with Lufwanyama, which was made law, imposed on the miners. It was almost impossible to shoot out. We discussed it, we've shot it out. And it's been accepted. So even to these things that we're discussing, it can be done. What we need is dialogue. If you think they are trampling on your feet too much, come out, bring it out. They will listen.
Thank you, Mr. Litana. Before we finish, I would like Mr. Michael Phiri to express his opinion on the subject, please.
I think we've generally agreed that harsh legislation would not be beneficial to any economy. As a matter of fact, I was watching South African news, and we had the privilege with Mulenga here of attending the mining in Dawa in Cape Town, and we saw the impact that some of the pronouncements that were made with regard to the mining sector in South Africa had, and how the minister was going against to try and get the mining and the business community to gain confidence again in investing in South Africa. And yesterday the news item was basically alluding to the fact that the rand is falling now, trading at above 10 rands to $1, primarily because of the measures that had been taken in the mining sector. They were not even taken, some of them were just pronouncements that were being made. And so these things are a way of impacting, harsh regulation as a way of impacting on the general economic development of the country. And here back home in Zambia, we also did see that when the windfall tax was introduced in 2008, it had to go through various revisions before it can be implemented, and subsequently it was removed. The concept wasn't bad in itself, but the way it was being implemented in the absence of dialogue made the whole implementation process become difficult, even for the Zambia Revenue Authority themselves, who are mandated to collect the tax, let alone the taxpayers who are required to pay the tax. And so it is important that dialogue is at the cornerstone of regulation that is being developed in a country. And much more, this dialogue must not come when the laws have been passed, because there are injuries and the perception on the market becomes wrong. That this dialogue must happen before the regulations are essentially passed. And this is where I derive benefit in a summit like the one that we are holding here today, to have on the same table Mr. Litana, Dr. Mulenga, who are key people in terms of formulating policies for the government with regard to the mining sector. And as we engage with them, let's take this very positively, the fact that we're going to have a better legislation rather than the harsh legislation. And so the only regrets that I have is that sometimes we have pronouncements and these affect the industry as it were. But with regards to what Kajam and other Gemstone people are grappling with, we know that that hasn't become law as yet. And so there's still hope as we deliberate that we'll get a better legislation rather than a harsh legislation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a matter of competitiveness. I mean, harsh regulation sometimes affect the competitiveness of a country. And this is for you, the industry, I guess, small-scale miners and big companies together to address the subject with the best practices. Take your destiny into your own hands and be proactive with the government and proactive into suggesting best practices, showing what's working best in other places, and get to an understanding that it's a win-win situation for everybody, within harming the industry, which is only like a born baby. It's just growing at the time. So we're talking about emerald, but I'm sure there are other opportunities in Gemstone in the industry that will be also benefiting from whatever is being done in this aspect. So I think that we could move to you have a conclusion?
I think, ladies and gentlemen, the lessons we have here is that the industry is usually very quiet. They just get on with their business. And the only time you hear from them is when the government has changed the law. And then they are complaining that the government has changed the law. What I would suggest in promoting growth in this industry is that as an industry, let's be proactive. Let's look at things we think are constraining growth, are constraining investment. And together, big and small, as my brother said, we come together and make proposals and engage government in the normal way when the waters are just calm waters, because when we engage government in a crisis, it's like we are fighting. But in the normal way of things, and what is coming to my mind is that maybe we need to look at the model in Zambia, because mining in Zambia has been dominated by the large-scale base metal mining. Everybody thinks in that mode. What we are learning from this summit is that this gemstone industry is a very different industry. It's not like copper industry. cobalt and lead and zinc. Maybe we need to articulate a concept and create a body that can deal with specific gemstone industry things that will make the country move forward. But ideas must come from the industry, because the industry is the one that knows best how to protect itself and grow.
Thank you. This is a fantastic conclusion. I think we should move to the next subject, which is the transfer pricing and optimizing annual revenue and profit in Zambia. So I will call Sean, and he will replace Mr. Vitana on the panel. I will ask my co-chair to start.
Now I have to take Well, we have transfer pricing and optimizing annual revenue and profits in Zambia. All the 1.5 days we have almost talked in every panel about things like that. How can you optimizing revenue and profits? We have seen yesterday the example from Gilbertson how they do it. The first thing, if you want to optimize your product, is to improve your product in cleaning it, in assorting it, in offering it in a way how the market likes to see it. That is to say, at that moment you do that, your price is going up, sometimes dramatically, much better than if you offer everything in a mixed lot, with mixed quality, mixed colors, nobody can understand, and everybody wants to buy for the cheapest price because the danger, the risk of losing money is too big. So optimizing your classification emeralds or in other stones, making the lots more uniform, more homogeneous, then you are able to get a good price for it, and the international market will accept it without any great difficulties. Of course, we are in a gemstone trade, there is a bargaining, but then you can be firm on your price and you will be sure that you will receive the price what you want to ask for. And therefore, I think this is the best way to do it. Please, may I give now the hot potato on your side, John Claude.
Thank you, Julius. Referring to the transfer pricing, I just give you an example. I've seen in other countries companies that set up shop within the country, and in some countries where they have inbound facilities, and they use the inbound facility at a lower price to get the merchandise outside, selling to another company that belongs to them and wish to make a bigger profit. So this is, I wouldn't say it's common, but it exists in our business. And it exists also in the high value industry where you have some companies established in Switzerland. This is why you see Switzerland as a very big country in importing gemstone, whereas they don't have a market for gemstone. And then they resell it to their own subsidiary at a higher price, making the profit in the middle. So this is what we call transfer pricing. Now, to my knowledge, transfer pricing is not permitted for listed companies on the stock exchange because they need to be transferred from A to Z. Exporting companies in producing countries are normally, they don't do that. And this is, if it's done, it's called money laundering. Transfer pricing can be compared to money laundering. And this is exactly what the project that we're working with in the United Nations is all about, is accountability of the last cent, that is revenue that needs to go back to the domiciliary account where the merchandise has been exported from. So these schemes that are evading the profit needs to be eliminated. And this is what the industry at the end of the chain wants to see. They want to be dealing with a clean, straight industry and be protected against attacks from, in crisis you have attacks from NGOs, from the press, from everybody, that the money should be accounted for and distributed socially and in a very normal way, a legal way. So that's I will have to say in terms of transfer pricing. I'm not sure this affects Zambia. I'm not sure. I know it affects in other countries, but I would know. So I would ask Sean. You could probably tell us what experience is. I mean, in terms of Gemfields, I know what they're doing, but probably know more about it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mulenga, for your assistance. So it's undoubtedly the case that transfer pricing is a very, very hot topic today, not only in Zambia, but in a number of other countries on this continent and on other continents. Resource nationalism, the fact that these resources do belong to their host nations, and making sure that appropriate revenues and profits accrue in those countries, one of the hottest topics out there. There is no doubt in my mind that there is a lot of transfer pricing that does take place within Zambia. There's no question. And I think it's absolutely correct that the government is looking at this issue and trying to clean up and put in place the systems to eliminate it to the maximum extent possible. We are probably a very interesting case in point. We abandoned the practice years ago of having Kajum sell to another Gemfields group company offshore. So Kajum stopped selling to Gemfields PLC or to another group company precisely because that practice leads people to think that you're selling it cheaply to yourself and then you make the profits offshore. So we abandoned that practice years ago. Instead, we put in place the practice of having Kajum export the emeralds for international auction. We pay the royalty here on a pre-agreed figure with the government, and then after the auction offshore, we make a top-up of the royalty payment depending on the actual market price we receive, and we then return all those funds, repatriate them to Kajum Mining Limited's bank accounts within Zambia. And strangely enough, that very mechanism of auctioning offshore is the one which is now at risk, and it's the one that the government directive is targeted at, potentially forcing us to go back to the old way of selling from Kajum to another Gemfields group company, because that's not under attack.
This is a statement that is, I mean, this is logic, this is business logic. If you need to market your products, you're going to buy it yourself from another company and put it to the marketplace. This is what you, and it makes business, makes sense. We have other companies in the group which will buy legally product from KGM and sell it to whatever the market can take it for. No auction, just paying royalties on the export value of to the buyer, which would be Gemfields, some other companies. Okay, Mr. Mulenga, please, any comments on that?
I think the comment is just, let's learn from the experts. What is the best thing we need to do? That's all.
I'm happy to comment there, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Essentially, to me, there is little doubt that the key is transparency. And the more the data becomes available, and the more the data is shared, not only among different government departments, but also with the industry, it becomes a lot easier for people to understand exactly how it happens, how much revenue is supposed to be collected, and then people can start comparing those profits with the profits made offshore by those companies. And I think government has now put together very good people to start looking at those express issues, and obviously there's been quite a lot of work on that, specifically in the copper business, but it also deserves looking at clearly in the emerald business. Mr. Phiri may have a comment to add.
Certainly. We do have transfer pricing regulations in Zambia, and I'm aware that the Zambia Revenue Authority is working not just with ATAF, which is the Association for Southern African Tax Revenue Authorities, in terms of coming up with regulations on transfer pricing, but they're also working with the Norwegian government and the IMF to try and formulate policies that will tackle transfer pricing. It is a big problem. The reason the best metal mining companies may not be contributing enough revenue, as it were, is primarily because there's a risk of transfer pricing, as it were. Now, when we come down to the gemstone industry, and perhaps speaking specifically about Kajum, whose history is in the open as well, to some extent, the other players who are also here, one cannot think of a better system of trading in emeralds, which like best metal you can determine the price by going to the London Metal Exchange and get a guide from there and apply it on the best metal. But you know, when you're dealing with gems like emeralds, the prices are not so easy to determine because they are dependent to a larger extent in the value that is seen by the purchaser. And so you find that a more transparent auction system becomes about the best way of having to deal with the problem of transfer pricing. Because if by any chance we were to sell to a related party, as used to happen in the days that Agura was running Kajan, that essentially was transfer pricing, because the gems were sold subsequently at a higher price, and that price never reached Zambia. But I think that the regulations that are being put in place now will, to a greater extent, address even the problem that was pertaining when Agura was running the mine. And just to say to you, Sean, that even if you chose to sell to Gemfields today, the way the legislation is being formulated to aim to be able to get the revenue, as it were, the foregone from the margins that Gemfields would have made on the ultimate sale of the gemstones. And that is all intended to tackle the problem. So now we have a solution that is working, and I think that it's worth considering, and if there are any misgivings, people could be able to look and see how we address those misgivings. I must say that to add to what you've spoken about, resource mobilization, transfer pricing, there's an even bigger debate worldwide on tax morality, because people are not just looking at paying tax from a legal perspective, because you can use the law in order to be able to minimize your tax exposure, as it were. And so now there's a debate on tax morality, that whatever schemes that you are putting in place, are they not just legal, but are they moral? Are you plowing back in the economy that you are deriving the benefit from? And when you weigh to a greater extent what Gemfields is doing, I think that there is aspect of morality in what they are doing, and it's worth commending.
Thank you very much to our panel and to our chairs for the various discussions. We will now open for a question and answer session. I think we can allow this time around for 15 minutes. Once again, please let's be mindful of time so that we have enough time for more questions and to carry on the discussions. I think the relevant speakers are already on the table. Now, this is a question and answer session that is open not only to the topic that we have just ended, but any other questions that may have arisen in the past 2 days for that matter, because notably this is the final discussion in our program, and indeed the final activity in our program. So now is the time to shoot out those questions, but certainly, as you can imagine, there are a lot, so please let's be mindful of time and summarize both in asking as well as answering. Thank you very much. Our ushers are available with the microphone. Okay, thank you.
I think my question is directly to Mr. Phiri. Yesterday we heard from the gentleman, I think it's from the auditing department in ZRA. I said my question is directed at Mr. Phiri. I was saying, I think yesterday we heard from Mr. Panellists, but it's also the ZRA, the auditing department. And today we have heard from Mr. Phiri again that government do really have a system of tracing the ultimate sale of the gems. But then why are we trying to make the process even longer by doing this here in Zambia instead of just letting, whether it's Kajam or Phiri, to sell the stones outside there where you can get the maximum money immediately? You know what you have to get from them. Thank you.
Mine, it's just a comment concerning selling the gemstone in Zambia or outside Zambia. I think the issue is not where to sell. The issue is, does the government monitor the production from A to B to Z? Do they know how many grams they produce a day or a week? I think that's the most important thing that we want as a Zambian. Where to sell doesn't matter much. But if you can monitor the production very well, I think that's what matters to Zambian people. Second, we are rushing to jump to go to Gemstone exchange. How many mines are they mining? Do we have miners in Zambia as of now? If we are to count, you will discover that there are about maybe 10 mines are mining right now in Zambia. We are not solving the problem. We are leaving problems unsolved. The issue that we want to solve as Zambian, I'm a miner myself, is how can we manage our mines? Because most of the mines are not working, especially those which are being run by Zambia. And if we are to open Gemstone exchange, do we know the system of market, how it is now? Because this system of opening a Gemstone marketing now, I think it cannot work. It was good for those days, not now. Thank you.
Any other question?
Hi, my name is Chris Pandora. Perhaps I could just say that I think the only party that's missing now, we've got a panel of specialists. Can you hear me now? We've got representation from a number of institutions, a number of experts, but the only thing that's missing is somebody from the government to explain the policy change and the reasons for it. We can make a number of suggestions here, but where they go from here is another issue, or where, if they get attended to. That's my only comment.
This is a good question. I'm not sure. Are there people from the government here today? Well, we can carry the message to them.
The government is here. Okay, so government is present. I'm EITI. I represent government interest in EITI. So we are here. So whatever we are saying to get information, and we'll deal with these issues as we've deliberated. Yes.
And if I may just add that we obviously have had the participation both of the Ministry of Mines in terms of the address yesterday, and also the Honourable Deputy Minister of Finance. And therefore, we are very pleased that there are some representatives in the audience also who work at the technocratic level, following some of the data to gradually start getting an understanding, which is the most critical thing in the industry.
Very good. Okay, well, maybe we can close this session. There's one more question.
Yeah, just a quick one, Mr. Chairman. I thought that maybe we should not lose the focus of the good intent of the summit. I think we have learned the useful lessons. We should speak broadly about the issues affecting us as of us. We shouldn't tilt the fact that we are here either to get government or we are here with specific positions. I thought we are here to share best practices open enough. Then if there's something we can take out of here to further consult is better. For example, I came with an open mind. I didn't want to come here. I'm not talking about a particular policy, and I don't want to think that, yes, Gemfields is the sponsor of this summit, but let's not debate a particular company so much. Let's deal with these matters open-minded so that the useful lessons we have, we don't lose it. Thank you.
I was going to respond to the particular question that was directed to me, but maybe before I do, I'll say that Dr. Sixtus Mulenga is sometimes a very humble man. He doesn't want to elevate himself as much as he really is. He is sitting on the Zambia Revenue Authority Constituted Committee that is advising government as well as the Zambia Revenue Authority on how they should address the taxation of mining companies. And so I think it's something that should be commended, because oftentimes we think that the solutions will come from the politicians, per se, But we've come to learn that unless you involve the technocrats, the people who understand the industry, you would not be able to come up with legislation that would stick. And so, just to comment on the question that was raised, or the comment that there is an absence of government, I was also elated to see that Joseph Nonde, who is the person responsible for mining, sat through and he has been engaging and wanting to learn a little more about the industry. That is where our hope lies, because in the past we've had legislation passed, sometimes retrospective, and sometimes you are caught by surprise. But in this particular instance, the law has not been met, and there's dialogue being engaged in, and we have people who can be able to shape the direction of the actual legislation that will come out, or regulations that will come out. And so this is indeed a very positive and momentous time that we are living. Now, the question that you asked with regards to whether the gemstones they're going to be banning, and everything now would have to be done locally. Again, I say there is a concern raised. The actual regulation has not been passed, and the government has been keen to listen, and they have representatives, and so there is hope that we'll be able to have regulations that will encompass even our thinking. And I would dare say that even after here, Dr. Sixtus Mulenga is a person you can contact, and there are others, Dr. Mpande and Dr. Munechanya, who are sitting on these committees that are forming the policies that the government will use. There are people that we can engage, even outside this summit, to be able to, if they have any doubt or they want to find out a little more about the trade. Now they know there's Sean, they know there's Suresh there, they know there's Carol. They can be able to contact these persons and engage and come up with legislation that will be beneficial to the sector. We all want to see our mineral resource benefit not just Gemfields or Grizzly, but benefit the Zambian in Lufanyama, and this is what we are all aiming for.
There's one more question.
Mine was not a question. I think what Mike has done is what... Is this thing on? Yes. Thank you.
There's something wrong with it.
What Mike has said is what I wanted to say. I do not wish us to focus so much on Gemfields and Kagem and so forth. Yes, we have our own challenges. Yes, we've engaged government. Yes, we're still engaged with government. We're not here when you're discussing local or international auctions because we were engaged in government. We're having meetings with government. But it's a broader policy for the industry. What is good for the industry? What is good for the economy of this country? I think that is what we need to focus on in these consultations here. The legislation has not been passed. I mean, what we're dealing with here is a pronouncement. It's not a legislation. It's not a law. As a lawyer, if I wanted to be pedantic with government, I would drag them to court, and I'm sure I would win my case. But that is not the issue. You know, the issue is there's some form of policy direction which government wants to pursue, but that policy direction has not been refined yet, and that is why, as Kagem and Gemfield will organize this, so that we can help the process of refining that policy direction and see the pros and cons of that policy direction. If the stakeholders should find that that policy direction is not in the best interest of the country, there's no harm in chewing humble pie and retracting. And I think all responsible governments do that. And I like to think that my government is a responsible government. If something is found not good for the economy, retract. If it is in the best interest of the economy, then rationalize it. And we begin to look at the rationalization of the policy, which will eventually translate into a regulatory framework. But right now, ladies and gentlemen, let us focus on the bigger picture. The bigger picture is the country, and the bigger picture is the industry in which you and I are involved.
Thank you. There's no more question, and maybe the gentleman can close the session this morning.